Welcome to episode 6 in June, where we discover our habit to reach higher. June's habit is to reach higher and be more adventurous. June's color is JOLT Orange to help jolt yourself out of the old ruts that don't fit anymore. Our goal for June is to break free of procrastination, stretch yourself to do the important task you've been putting off for too long. Reaching higher is not just about achievement, it's about reaching for the higher love, the higher thought, and the higher power. The 12-step people recognize that when faced with the deepest challenges of life, we need to turn to a higher power that is bigger than the solutions our smaller mind has fixated on. A well-known hit bottom mantra is, quote, "All my best thinking got me here," unquote. In contrast, when we're being pulled forward by a higher purpose, it becomes easier to overcome blocks like procrastination. So, what is your unique purpose? How do you need to stretch yourself to realize it? Remember, now is the time because it's too late to do it sooner. Hi, I'm Steve Bhaerman, and welcome to June, the 6th month of the year, when we focus on reaching higher and jolting ourselves out of any unpleasant ruts we may have fallen into that we're ready to climb out of. June is the month to do it. Make the habit in June to break free of limitations and insecurities that can be holding you back from working toward your dreams and desires. June is the month of summer solstice, when the sun and nature is celebrating the joy of change. Remember, reaching higher in your life often takes time, courage, and also realize that the big achievements happen in baby steps and in making good use of your time, step by step. As you learned in our introductory episode to the 12 habits as the path to mutual enlightenment, this path is a new way to actually put our desire for unity and intentional evolution into real practices. We can grow spiritually while at the same time practicing these habits in real life helps us achieve what Bruce Lipton calls heaven on earth, which is why he endorses the 12 habits path. Best way to get to heaven is to start there, and these habits give us a head start. I found that they're the most enjoyable way to put evolution into practice because we're all doing it together at the same time in a coherent way. And now I'd like to introduce my cohort in this webinar, the creator of the 12 Habits Path to Unity, Elaine Parke. Welcome, Elaine.
Hello, Steve. Glad to be here, the month of June.
JOLT Orange. What an interesting color that is. How'd you come up with JOLT Orange?
Well, since June is the month to reach higher, first of all, just by itself, orange is a vibrant color and just going to catch your attention. So again, going back to the way to make the colors sound a little more interesting than just the plain old colors, we decided, why not call it JOLT Orange? Let's jump ourselves out of anything that might be holding us down. So that's why we chose JOLT Orange for the color for June.
Reach higher. I first heard it as retire. No, not retire, reach higher. And I love that JOLT Orange. It's kind of jolting us out of our complacency, kind of like jump-starting your battery. So how did you come up with this practice, reach higher, for June?
Well, going all the way back to the original representative group of people in the little town in Pennsylvania where we started it, everyone in the group said, you got to have a month that's going to kick people out of their placency. And of course, I wouldn't know bored if I fell over it. So I kind of fought back a little bit with the group. And I said, we don't need to have a month for that. And they said, yes, we do. And so, they overrode me. We decided to make June. But here's the interesting thing. Originally, we chose the idiom, jump out of a rut, which is an idiom for reach higher. And so my first book, Join the Golden Rule Revolution, you'll see that the month of June is called Jump Out of a Rut. Well, probably 7 or 8 years into the program, we had a focus group with teenagers. And we were asking these teenagers to kind of comment on the months. And, these teenagers were like, jump out of a rut, what's that? And we realized that jump out of a rut is an idiom from the old horse and buggy days. And of course, the teenagers didn't know what it meant. So because of that, they did a little focus group, and the teenagers decided to name the month Be Adventurous. So for the next 10 or 15 years, again, the same thought, just upgraded, just an upgraded perspective, and certainly leaving behind the old horse and buggies. So after the kids had convinced us that we couldn't call it Jump Out of a Rut, we changed the name to Be Adventurous. And the name of the habit for June was Be Adventurous for a long time after that, really right up until 5 or 6 months before I was ready to publish the new book, which is The 12 Habits of Unity. And somewhere I was just reading something and I came across the words reach higher. And I thought, June, be adventurous, reach higher is a more purposeful, a wiser way of verbalizing what we really mean and the essence of the wisdom that we're trying to reach for in June. So that's when I changed June to reach higher, and that's why it's reach higher today.
The reach higher reminds me of the Robert Browning quote, but a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? Well, interestingly, reach higher has a couple of connotations. First of all, it's to stretch yourself beyond your perceived limitations, beyond your comfort zone. And it also refers to reaching for a higher purpose that spurs us to show up in a different way. So tell us more about that, Elaine.
Well, sometimes when people, stop and think about their lives and think of what they want to have in their lives, they put together a bucket list. And one of the things on my bucket list was to fly in a hot air balloon. And I just did that not long ago. I'm reminded of a story I told in an earlier episode about a man named Robert that I'd met in Sedona, the same place where I did the hot air balloon, playing a flute at the Kachina Rock, who had, in his earlier career, he had been an investment banker in New York City. And he wanted to reach higher. He wanted to reach more. He wanted a more meaningful life. So that man left, as I explained before, he left his New York City investment banking job, came to Sedona. I don't know if you know how to play the flute before, but spends every day there, and he is reaching higher than I'm sure he ever could have reached before when he was an investment banker in New York. Maybe other people don't look at it that way. That's not certainly the Western civilization way of reaching higher, but I'll tell you, that man was a vision and an angel, and he was the man who reached higher. I think certainly of many people who have uplifted me over the years, starting with the neighbor that took me to the Red Cross. And so, kind of reaching higher is a combination of gratitude and setting your goals and knowing what it really is that you want to do with your life. Asking yourself again, is this what I want to be doing with my life? And asking, can I do more? Is there a little higher that I can reach?
By the way, thank you for bringing up the bucket list. Swami has a definition for bucket list. A bucket list is a list of all the undertakings you wish to undertake before being overtaken by the undertaker. Well, seriously, the biggest challenge and breakthrough, my reach higher moment that changed my life and changed my career, came in a workshop I did 30-something years ago. It was called On Communication. And the challenge of this workshop was, what is it that you're really here to do? And how long are you going to wait to actually do it? And so at that workshop, I decided that I was going to pursue comedy as a full-time career. I had no idea how I would do this. It was completely out of my comfort zone. I was working as a teacher, as a freelance writer, and yet I made this declaration without having a clue as to how I would do it. And then all of a sudden, the universe began to give me breadcrumbs. My good friend Alan Barsky said, hey, you ought to perform as Swami Beyondananda. I'm a introvert. I'm a writer. I went, that was not comfortable for me. But then a well-known workshop leader and teacher actually invited me to come to an event and do a comedy show. Well, all of a sudden, I have an invitation. I go there. I do my first performance as the Swami. It was very well received, hugely successful. Came back to Michigan where I was living. And about 3 weeks later, I met Trudy, my life partner. And within a year and a half, we were on the road with the traveling Swami and Trudy show. Were it not for, first of all, the instance where I was bumped out of my job as a teacher, doing tree work and learning comedy, and then to really reach higher, go way out of my comfort zone, to choose a career I'd never been prepared for that career, and then to notice how the universe showed up with one thing after another to facilitate the path that's been my path for the last 35 years. So I'm sure, Elaine, in all the years you've been doing this work, you have some amazing stories of people who chose to reach higher.
I do, Steve. And perhaps it's time to start with my own story. You've heard quite a bit about the different things that affected me over my life. You may or may not know that at the peak of my corporate advertising career, I was the vice president of marketing for one of the largest distributor of beauty salon supplies in the United States. My friends used to say, "What's an altruist like you doing selling hairspray?" But anyway, while I was running the advertising department for that firm, and meanwhile, I was doing volunteer work in the inner city of Cleveland, Ohio. And I was in a first grade classroom trying to help a little girl who didn't look like she was going to pass to second grade. Her name was Veranda. And I was working at a little table outside of the normal classroom tables with her, using special materials to try to get her to learn her letters and numbers so she could pass to second grade. And she just was not getting it. All of a sudden, the classroom door flew open, and this rageful, huge man came stumbling in the room right at Rwanda. And I can still to this day cannot believe that the teacher got in the way and stopped that man from reaching Veranda and I, who were over in the corner. But we all knew that it was her father. And clearly I could see what her life was like outside of that classroom. So the next week I went back and I sat with her at this little table with the materials. And this time I started putting my arm around her, just a little bit around her shoulder so that she felt the comfort. I realized that she was starving for attention and affection. And once I put my arm around her shoulder, we started working. And within 2 weeks, she'd learned her letters and numbers and had passed into second grade, possibly with a little bit to catch up on, but nonetheless, she passed into second grade. And I had that feeling that so many people who are spending their time volunteer have. I mean, I had helped Veranda, but there are hundreds of millions and by millions of Verandas that need help. There's not ever enough people to help. And I kept thinking, how can I multiply my own ability to have an impact? And then I went back to my office, and there with a staff of 12 people, I was routinely influencing the lives of hundreds of thousands of potential buyers. So that was the moment. I mean, I knew that something was ahead for me, and it was going to involve the combining of my professional career and what my real love of helping and volunteering was, but I didn't know what it was. So it was still another 5 years after that I had the vision about putting the months together with 12 different aspects of golden rule and wise living to be happy. And here I am today. I once had a beautiful navy blue Audi 80, camel interior car, all the corporate perks. Within 6 months, I was living in a janitor's boiler room in a basement in Pittsburgh, asking for money. But hey, it's just the way it is. When you're called upon to do something with your life, there's just no way you can turn your back on it. There's a few other people. There's a young blind man. Once we got this going, this would have been in Somerset, a young blind man who was inspired to write 12 songs about each of the 12 habits. We still have that music today. It's never been professionally produced, but if it were, I think they might be, get on the top. They would get in the top songs available because they're just so really good. There's a bus driver I met who lived in Eugene, Oregon, who was taken with the idea of the 12 habits. And he went back and started, just like you did, Steve, with the newsletter that you wrote for the workers. He wrote a newsletter called The Spirit of All of Us, and he shared the habits with all the people who were employed by the Eugene, Oregon Transportation Department. So reaching higher is something that each and every one of us can do. And I can't imagine what my life would have been like if I'd stayed in corporate America, because I love what's happened to me over all these years since, and I'm much appreciative and glad that I reached higher.
Wow, that sounds like a wonderful journey from high-powered to higher-powered.
Oh,
It's always easier to tell people why they can't do something. I keep thinking, I did an article many, many years ago on the Wright brothers and what people were saying prior to their flying. You know, uh, those who said that man would never fly, well, they were wrong about the Wrights. Here's a quote from William Law, A Serious Call to a Devout and Holy Life, 1728. Quote, what can you conceive more silly and extravagant than to suppose a man racking his brains and studying night and day how to fly? There's another quote from a Dayton, Ohio newspaper where the editor said, quote, man will never fly, and if he does, he will never come from Dayton, unquote. So we know that they were wrong about the Wrights. And I think that those people who actually take the stretch to make that this month of June the time to stretch beyond what you've been putting off, to stretch to do what you're really here to do, the payback and the payoff will be great, not just for you, but for everyone in your world. Elaine, anything else to add about that?
There's a couple of quotes from the book that are very pertinent to the idea of reaching higher. One is, boldness is the quiet first step of courage. Another by Goethe, which is my absolute favorite. I love many things that Goethe said. Life is the childhood of our immortality. Let me say it again. Life is the childhood of our immortality. That's why being playfulness and having fun and color is so important to having a full, rich life. And lastly, you can turn stumbling blocks into stepping stones. And there is another way that I did that. Long before I was head of marketing for a big marketing corporation, I was a young mother at home with an infant and a toddler. I had a husband who was never home, and I wasn't feeling very good about myself. And one night I was brushing the kids' teeth with this electric Snoopy toothbrush. And I took the toothbrush and I was going to change the head anyway. And I turned it on again and I ran it around, a little bit of grunge around the faucets. And I thought like, wow, this is pretty cool. This toothbrush actually cleaned the dirt off the faucets. So I thought, but it's just not big enough. And so here I am at home with these little kids. And I start writing out the idea of how we could have a cordless electric scrubber that would actually be powered and would actually work. And it's a really big, long story, but I did it. I now am the holder of 2 United States patents for that cordless electric scrubber. You can actually go, if you don't already have one, I do. You can go on the internet and look for it. And that's what I did with my time as a young mother at home alone with a couple of little kids.
You know, so often we achieve these things, we have these accomplishments, and the reason why we have them is because nobody told us we couldn't do it. So we go ahead and do it anyway. There are a lot of voices out there of limitation, and I remember reading a wonderful story about a successful prison program in upstate New York that was run by a Native American elder. And again, if you know about anything about these programs, recidivism, that is returning to prison, about 75% of people who are in prison and get released return to the system, right? But this program had a exact opposite. 75% of the people didn't return to the system. And the first thing that this teacher taught was respect. It was respect for self and respect for other people, which is really one and the same thing. Respect for life, respect for self, and respect for other people. And one of the things that the respect had to do with was respect for our individual gifts and proclivities, whatever they are. And the mantra that he gave to people that I think really broke the trance of being in prison and being in the system, and gave them a sense of purpose. He says, there is something in the world that if you don't do it, it won't get done. I mean, think about the missions that people had in really being the first in trying to convince loads and loads and loads of people. I think about Steve Jobs convincing people that we needed personal computers. Could you imagine personal computers without Steve Jobs? Or could you imagine I Have a Dream without Martin Luther King? So if you have a dream, large or small, this is the time to spring yourself out of the prison of the ordinary by reaching higher. So remember that we want you to be a peer participant in this process. During this month of June, go to our website, go to our Facebook page, declare how you are planning to reach higher this month, and be inspired by some of the other people who are also stretching themselves in what could be a life-changing month. So the practice for June, ask yourself, how will I stretch out of my comfort zone this week? And then make a plan to do that. Give yourself permission to move ahead without excuses, without rationalizations, or without any yes buts. Forget the word but entirely. This is the month to kick butt, particularly your own. At the end of the month, evaluate. Did I stretch? How did I stretch? What happened? Was it worthwhile? What did I learn? How did it change my life?